All right, welcome everyone. My name is Deepak Saini, founder of Deepak Saini Health and personalbluezones.com. I have a very, very special guest today. I'm very excited to interview him. I'm just going to read his bio here. So he's one of the most sought after anti-aging physicians in the US. At his Vuu MD Longevity and Performance Clinic, he regularly works with celebrities, top corporate executives, and high functioning professionals to optimize their health, performance, and vitality. He's also a health media personality, appearing on national TV shows, as The Doctors and Access Hollywood, and he helps to train the next generation of physicians as assistant professor of health sciences at UCLA. As someone who's overcome two chronic diseases himself, he is passionate about empowering people to reclaim their health and live with fulfillment, abundance, and purpose. Welcome, Dr. Kien Vuu.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Deepak.
Oh, it's all my pleasure to have you here. So Kien, I've had the opportunity to recently read your new book, Thrive State. Congratulations on that, by the way. Where you get into the philosophy of health, and we share a lot of similar things in our background. Maybe we'll get into that as we go along here. But what really hooked me, besides, again, we have a very similar philosophy of how we approach health and how we approach working with our clients. But it's also that early, that not only the early health challenges, but I guess also that bullying. And that's something I actually have never really talked a whole lot about on any of my interviews or anything like that. So why don't we start there? Well, let's go right back to the beginning and tell us, those early experiences and the bullying, how that came about.
Yes, certainly. Well, I mean, I'm just going to, preface this, we'll go back there in just a second, but I am a medical doctor. A lot of people ask me, hey, what kind of doc are you? So I am a medical doctor. I do have an MD. I was trained in interventional and diagnostic radiology by some of the top institutions in the United States, including the NIH, UCLA, UC San Diego. Also board certified in anti-aging and longevity medicine. And really, I was practicing as a interventional radiologist. And for people who don't know what that is, it's actually a medical doctor that uses medical imaging, radiology, to do minimally invasive procedures. And so I've done procedures on people with diabetes, hypertension, chronic heart disease, renal failure, things like that. So I really got a chance, both as a radiologist, to diagnostically see what disease looks like in the body, but to also do procedures and work on patients. But it was a couple of years ago that, about 5 years ago now, that I was overweight, diabetic, hypertensive, and I was at a place in my career where I was getting early stage disease of the ones I was treating. And I said to myself, that is not right. I am really a true hypocrite. And I did, we'll get into how I healed myself, but that brings me back to the original story, because it was me lost in wanting to achieve success as an MD, so much so that I was not aligned with who I was as a person, chronically stressed, didn't eat well, didn't sleep well, and then I got disease. And as I started to reverse all those things and then understood the root cause of why I was living this stressed life, that I was able to tap back into health and vitality. And where does this all start? Well, this starts with the question you asked. It was my background. So I was a boat refugee. I was born in Vietnam a couple of years after the Vietnam War. And my parents were pharmacists in Vietnam. And when the communists had taken over, they had really seized all the businesses. And there were really no real hope for any type of growth for my parents living in Vietnam. And so they had decided to escape with me on a boat. So we were boat refugees. I was on a boat for 8 months. I was the only infant that survived. In fact, I had dysentery when I was on the boat. I spent another 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp. And then I was sponsored to the United States by a Catholic church at the age of 2. And one would think a child, being the only infant to have survived, and now in this land of plenty, where I could live the American dream, you think that child would be very grateful, right? But that wasn't the case, right? We grew up very, very poor, and I got bused to a more affluent area for school because I was tested highly gifted. Well, being a poor Asian kid at a rich kid school was definitely no walk in the park, so I was constantly being bullied, a lot of name calling. Chink was a favorite of ours. Yellow skin. They would constantly make fun of the holes in my hand-me-down clothes or the stinky food that my mom sent me to school with. There was a lot of bullying. And what I had to do was I really felt like I had to, come up. I coped with that by a louder personality, leaned into humor a lot. But, internally, I was always feeling like I was less than, being Asian American, and this is a great conversation to have now because there's a lot of hate crimes happening in the US, with people thinking that Asian people are responsible for the coronavirus. So I got that all throughout my life and was carrying the energy of I am not worthy, I am not good enough. And, when I became a physician, I'd love to say that I became a physician to help people. Yes, I wanted to help people, but there was also the, I needed to prove myself. I needed, I need to be respected. And so I used that white coat to hide that not enoughness I was having inside. And when you're not feeling like you're enough, when you're feeling constantly stressed out that you need something outside of yourself to achieve or to succeed or to make yourself feel worthy, well, internally, you're giving your body a signal. And that's the stress signal that we'll talk about. And what that does is it raises inflammatory markers in your body. It will decrease your inflammation. And that will set you up to have bad health habits and will set you up to get chronic disease. So all that bullying, I just talked about that on the news the other day. The bullying, the hate affects both the parties. It affects the victims of hate because I had mild forms of depression and anxiety, which ultimately led to bad health habits that gave me chronic disease. But on the other side, the hate, the resentment that happen even from the people that are doing the bullying, well, it just goes to show that those emotions also raise inflammation, decrease immunity, and the people that live in those emotions of hate, resentment, and anger actually live less than the general population. So really long-winded answer to your question, but that was my background story.
I wasn't even going to ask this question, but you brought this up. So let me throw this at you, totally off the top of my head. Obviously, I live in Canada, is not much different than the US. We're maybe like this much healthier. Overall, we're pretty much the same. Would you think that, is it kind of a chicken and egg? Do you see like a lot of, systemic racism, division, that sort of things leading to chronic issues, or because we have other issues that have led to chronic issues is actually making that worse, or they just kind of go hand in hand? And I know I don't want to delve too much in now. We're going to talk about a lot about other things about your story, but just popped in my head. So any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think they add to each other. I don't necessarily think there's a chicken and egg per se. I would like to say, there's more media out there, so we are more aware of these issues right now. But hate is a virus that is larger than any virus we've ever faced. It's larger than the coronavirus. It has caused more deaths because of killings and more than any other virus, right? It has caused more, physical and mental disease than any other virus. And that has lasted throughout history. In fact, the world has gotten a little bit better. And it's not perfect yet. And certainly I would like more representation for minorities and things like that. The thing is, it is better. And now that we've got the means, we've got the media to be able to show it, it's definitely front and center, but we can be improving more on that matter. But to answer the question was it all this hate that started everything? No, it was hate that led to disease, but the agricultural industry, processed food industry, all these things kind of add to the mix of chronic disease.
For sure. And I respect for your time, so I don't know how much we're going to dive into all of that, but we certainly could talk for hours on that. But before I move into the next question, I just really wanted to just again kind of reiterate, I totally understand your story. I've actually, one of my brother-in-laws is actually, was a refugee as well. His family just ended up coming to Canada. But being of a mixed ancestry, my dad's East Indian from India. My complexion, a lot of people think, oh, is this guy Italian, or, maybe, Vietnam, Lebanese or something like that. But I mean, with my name, I'd get Paki, all this stuff, go back to Pakistan. Like hey, my dad's not even from Pakistan. What are you talking about? Type of thing. So I totally understand that. And again, that, trying to succeed and all the stress that comes with that. And again, I don't want to delve too much into my story, but, So one thing that sort of came up, and you kind of alluded to it already, just about sort of nutrition and food habits and that sort of thing. So I've talked to many doctors here in Canada, a few that I know in the States, obviously listen to a lot of podcasts and that sort of thing. Is nutrition education getting any better in medical school, or is it still very small and kind of leave it to the registered dietitians type of thing?
Yeah, great question. So it is starting to get a little bit better, although I am a little bit removed from that. I just know that the residents that I have that I'm currently teaching at UCLA, they're seeing more nutritional knowledge, coming from social media and things like that. And they are incorporating it a little bit more. I'm asking them, hey, has the curriculum changed? They're like, oh, we probably got a little bit. But in response to that question, I certainly didn't. I think I got, if anything, a lecture or two, or on nutrition. So we going through medical training in the U.S., and I don't know if that's the case for Canada as well. The culture of going through medical school and to become a physician is actually not a healthy lifestyle. In fact, that's why so many physicians, end up getting sick or getting chronic disease, right? I mean, you're not sleeping, you're on call for hours and hours on end. The food that's available to you at the hospital is not very healthy food at all. That just leads to a recipe of disaster. And people are starting to wake up a little bit. And I think, a lot of movement from people outside of the medical field is starting to have some doctors and some people going through the medical training process to wake up and say, oh my God, I'm really not taking care of myself. And I'm not really learning how to do that with my training. And a lot of people are probably stepping up to learn it, for themselves. So is there improvement? I think so, because although I'm not personally on the ground, I do know several organizations that have reached out to medical schools that are starting to provide some additional education for the students.
Okay, well, it certainly can only get better, I guess, right? And
Right.
it can
Yeah.
keep improving for sure. So tell me about what's behind the white coat.
Behind the white coat, yes. So about, I mentioned to you about 5 years ago, I was overweight, diabetic, hypertensive, was on prescription meds, and I thought I had lived the ideal life, right? I had a fancy house, I had a fancy car, I was traveling around the world, speaking on advanced topics in interventional radiology, and I didn't realize this, but I left a lot of my joy and my happiness behind. I was so much in a state of trying to succeed that I had lost myself. And it was right around that time that I decided to leave my full-time job as chief of interventional radiology at the hospital I was at. And when I was a kid, I wanted to do something in entertainment. I don't know why I had that I was drawn to that, but I remember, seeing people like Robin Williams, Mick Jagger, Tony Robbins, and like, this is cool. They're really influencing people, able to make them laugh, able to make them cry, able to motivate people. I enjoyed that. And so I just said, I'm not going to think about, where this will lead. I'm just going to do something just because it's fun, just because it makes me feel happy. And so I went out, and there was this art gallery in Los Angeles, and the art gallery was owned by a friend of mine and Andy Dick. If you guys don't know Andy Dick, he's a comedian that gets himself into a lot of trouble. But we were filming a lot of shows and content, out of that art gallery. And my friend, suggested that I do, he said, hey, you've always wanted to do entertainment, you should do a health show. And that's what Behind the White Coat was. It was basically a show shot from, very low budget. It was me, some, B and C list, Hollywood celebrities doing health topics. And it was just a fun show combining a little bit of Hollywood and a little bit of comedy.
So is this a side thing, or like, were you also, because you said you left your position at the hospital, did you go somewhere else, or did you just take a break from medicine and were just kind
No,
of...
so I did interventional radiology part-time, but I told myself, hey, I need to figure me out. And on that off time, I did a lot of, deep personal work. I've worked with plant medicines. Did, Tony Robbins, basically traveled around, his inner circle for a year with that team. Mind Valley events, A Fest, plant medicine. So I went in really deep in healing and learning, and then also, dove in deep into the medicine of anti-aging and regenerative medicine as well. So yeah, I left my full-time job doing full-time interventional radiology, but I was still teaching interventional radiology to UCLA medical students and residents, but also used that time to really, rediscover and redevelop who I was.
That's fantastic, because I think a lot of people don't, no matter what career they're in, they never take that break, or they never feel like they can just step away part-time or something. So that's fantastic. That you did that. I want to take the next question. I want to dive into the book, and one page in particular, and hopefully
Sure.
you remember which page. So in chapter 4 on page 88, or at least the version of the book I have, you say, and I quote here, "Like most things in life, moderation is key." So I have a bone to pick with anything that's like everything in moderation, and I'll come to that why I think that. Or what, but my question to you is, do you truly believe that, or do you think that people like actually don't understand what that means and they misconstrue it?
I think most people actually know. I mean, when you look at my book, there's a lot of information that's there, but I think to a certain degree, people understand, a plate of steamed broccoli is better than a slice of pizza. I think most people sort of understand that. And I think there are still things out there in the world that people sort of enjoy. And I think for somebody whose health habits are just in havoc, they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, all these things, to live up to a standard of pristine health eating or whatnot can be very stressful, and it could be at a place where it's very hard to sustain. And if you happen to have friends that might not be as strict in your health standards, you could be losing a lot of friends too. So I always like to tell people, I myself follow a 70-30 or an 80-20 rule, whether, it comes to healthy eating habits, sleeping habits, and things like that. So that to me is moderation. And I hope people can understand that version of themselves. And if they also need to understand, like, for example, if they are, a diabetic or a pre-diabetic, or if they're, I've got a family history of that person might not be able to tolerate, high glycemic fruits or sugars or that pastry as well. And you have to make other type of changes. So for that person, when you moderate, that's going to be different from the person that, can handle the blood sugars a little bit more. So you just have to understand that. But I use the word moderation only to leave a little leeway so that people don't get overwhelmed by trying to live up to a lifestyle that, that is, perfectionist.
No, I appreciate you clarifying that. You put a little life into living, as Vinnie Tordrich
Right.
likes to say. I'll just preface what I meant earlier with my contention with it is sometimes, especially when it comes from nutrition, and of course health is everything, and I truly believe you got to take baby steps when you're trying to make changes, and that's really what I do with my clients. But I'll have even friends, family members like, well, I only Saturday morning they're in a rush, they'll grab a donut. And it was like, oh, well, I when was the last time I had a donut? And then Sunday they go up for like pancakes and syrup and the whipped cream and all that. It's like, oh, when was the last time I did that? And then like, oh, pizza, Tuesday night pizza, Wednesday night wings. It's like, well, I only do that once a week. It's like, it's in moderation, but you add it all up and it's like, no,
Right.
that's like 5 meals in a week that you were like just totally destroyed you. So that's kind of where I'm coming
Right.
from in that. Let's take it a little bit different direction here. So in the book, in your book, Thrive State, you recommend a couple other books, and people can certainly look those up,
Mm-hmm.
when they catch, read the book themselves. But and again, we talked a bit before we started recording that I'm huge into books. The last couple of years, and 2020 was a fantastic year. So I'm doing great, as I'm always looking for book recommendations. So outside of what you already recommended in Thrive State, what are some of your favorite books? They could be health or otherwise.
Okay. Outside. Okay. Well, I did put in quite a few that I enjoyed, but one of my favorites is Mindset by Carol Dweck, who actually talks about the growth mindset and the and the limiting mindset. And I think for people to be able to say, oh, okay, I don't necessarily have to believe what I think, and there are other options, will start to give you more choices in life in terms of how you want to act and how you want to show up in the world. So I thought that was a very, very beautiful book. Carol Dweck, the book is Mindset. If I had to choose a book on health that I didn't already mention, well, I mean, I wrote a health book, so most of the ones that that I recommend that are already in there. But was there a runner-up or honorable mention that I did not put in there on health? It may be The Power of When by a friend of mine, Dr. Michael Bruce. And he talks about basically chronotypes that, our sleeping patterns are going to basically differ. And, if you're somebody that is programmed biologically more of a night owl, trying to wake up early is not going to be very, very productive for you. So, if you start to understand your chronotype, you'll, know for you, when's a good time to wake up, when's a good time to, work out, when's a good time to have sex. So check that out if you haven't already.
Yeah, that's a fantastic book. And I teach a stress management course specifically designed towards accountants, actually. And that's one of the books and his quiz that I mentioned. And it's interesting too, because me and my wife actually, we're not like complete opposites, but we're a little bit off. She's a little bit more of the night owl than I am. So it always makes a bit challenging in your relationships for sure. So another thing that I really appreciate is I'm a quote guy as well. I love quotes. I write them down. I have a spreadsheet full, and I'll quite often something comes to me. I'm like, I think sometimes too, and maybe you're the same. Sometimes quotes just come to you when it's the perfect time. It's just the mindset you're in, or what you're doing in business, or even what's going on in the world, and you're just like, whoa, like this Marcus Aurelius quote is like, at least to me, it makes sense of what's going on in current events or something like that. Right. So again, there's a ton of great quotes in Thrive State, but what is your favorite? And it could be one that's already mentioned, but what's your favorite quote of all time?
My favorite quote of all time would have to be the one from Byron Katie. And she says, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And that just gives me perspective that at any point of, in time, I could have a perspective shift. And I start to ask myself the question, when COVID first hit last year, my hospital, that I was doing part-time work with, it got slammed. I was afraid for the patients. I was afraid for my family. I come back, there was a historic drop. I think, the stock market like plummeted 3,000 points. And I'm like, oh my God, my investments just went like that. And I was in a state of stress. And then every time I get into that state, of stress, I already ask myself, how is this happening for me? And if we could have the foresight, because the thing is, if I look back in time, I could always think that struggle led me to be stronger. I learned something very important from that point of weakness. And if we were to always take that retrospective scope and look back in time, all those things that might be struggles, like Ram Dass says, happens to be, struggle is the sandpaper for our awakening. And if I could apply that quote to something that's going on right now, then I don't have to go through the struggle and the pain of trying to resist what's happening right now. And when you start to ask yourself the right questions, your brain starts to come up with the right answers. So if I'm ever struggling and I say, how is this happening for me? My brain then starts to go, oh no, this is giving me more time to spend with family right now that I really need to connect with, which it really, really did. It actually allowed me to open up my telemedicine practice, which it did. So I just found that to be a very, very powerful quote. And again, whenever I find myself stressed out or any emotions of fear, doubt, worry, anxiety, I go to that.
That's a great quote. I love that quote. So, obviously in Thrive State, we talk about a lot of the different pillars of health, and, movement is one of them. What does, and you can tell you're a fit guy. What does your weekly movement look like for you?
Weekly movement. So, yeah, it's actually pretty simple. I do about 2 days of weights, weightlifting is very important. Any type of resistance training to increase lean muscle mass. Lean muscle mass is actually the number one tissue that will lead to longevity. One, because it's most metabolically, active. And then two, it, saves you from getting, fractures and things like that down the road. So at least 2 times a week will be some sort of resistance training or weightlifting. Another 2 days a week of maybe high intensity interval training. And then a day a week, I will just do a, crazy sprint, to maximal intensity. And then every day, sitting is definitely the new smoking. So as long as I do some level of low level functional movement, which is walking, which is maybe squats, some occasional lunges, I'm always trying to incorporate that throughout the day as well.
Greasing the groove, so to speak.
What's that?
Greasing the groove a little bit, right?
Greasing the groove, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. It's very, we have a very similar practice and very primal Marxist-esque
yes.
as well, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so what does the first 60 to 90 minutes of your morning look like? And then on top of that, second part, with the last 60 to 90 minutes of your day?
Sure. Great question. It's changed up a little bit. I not only have a new daughter, but I have a new puppy. And that puppy wakes me up about 5:45 in the morning, every morning. So I wake up and, I immediately take her. Well, actually, before I take her out on her walk, I will down, a good, 16 ounces of water, maybe with some lemon in it and some sea salt, just to hydrate, because sleeping at night is very dehydrating. You're breathing a lot. So just to get yourself rehydrated, then I go out and I try to get some early morning sunshine. So that's great to boost vitamin D, but it resets your circadian rhythm and it tells your body to wake up. So I'm out there with my dog. We usually go for a little bit of a jog. I come back, I feed her, and then I'm looking at the things that I need to do for that day. And usually, and we'll go over this in my night list, I'm already writing down the things that I needed to do the night before. So I'm going over that list again. I'm doing a little bit of extra journaling, and it's so important. So I either meditate or I just write down affirmations or things like that, something to just get myself emotionally to a thrive state, right? I need to put myself in that state because with that energy, I know that, whatever crap is going to come my way, and there's certainly going to be crap coming your way throughout the day, that you can approach that.
And you have new babies. You have a new baby. So there's definitely there's definitely going to be some crap coming, right?
Exactly. There's a lot. In fact, I just changed probably the biggest crap diaper over the last couple of months. But I do something, to really get myself in the state of gratitude, get myself in a beautiful state. And then usually I'm working out with my trainer, Eric, the trainer. I go and I do that. And that's probably the first 90 minutes to 2 hours of my day is really priming myself mentally, emotionally, physically, so that I can show up at my best the rest of the day. What does my evening routine look like? I usually slap on the night version of those glasses, anywhere from about 8 o'clock or so. And I'm just sitting there, I'm winding down. I might be taking a warm shower or a bath with some magnesium. I will journal or meditate again. And again, the journaling is important just to kind of get stuff out of your head. There might be some stuff that stress you out during the day. Just getting it out of your head onto a piece of paper, you will be surprised how much that reduces the reverberation of those thoughts if you didn't do that. Then I'm in bed with my partner and we spend some pillow time talking with each other, maybe doing some reading there, and then we're off to bed.
Fantastic. So in the book, you also talk a little bit about biohacking, and that's kind of become a term. It was pretty defined like 5 years ago. Now it's kind of like a whole bunch of stuff. So right. What do you personally do for biohacking, and maybe what's a couple of your favorite biohacks?
Yeah. So, excuse me, for sleep, I love the blue light blocking glasses. I typically just use them at night. So blue light blocking glasses for sleep. I also sleep on a chili pad, which keeps my mattress at 60 degrees. So if we cool down our bodies, between 60 and 68 degrees is the best temperature to sleep at. So we have that for sleep. I also take some magnesium, some glycine for sleep as well. What else do I do for biohacking? I lost my Aura ring, but that's a device that I like to track my sleep with, my HRV with, and things like that. So I like that as a device. I will take, part of my morning routine is usually when I come back, I'll take a cold shower, and that cold shower helps wakes me up. And that's, I find that actually reduces a lot of tension, helps wake me up very, very naturally. So that's a great biohack that I like to do. And occasionally I also like to go to, I don't know, you have it over in Canada, but certainly like to go to cryo chambers to get that done, or to occasionally do an ice bath as well. Those are favorites. What else do I do?
We don't need them
So
because eight months of the
therapy.
8 months of the year we can just run outside in the snow, so we don't really need cryo
Right,
chambers.
there you go.
There's a few around, but they're not as common here by any means. Sure.
Right, and I also like red light therapy. I'll do that while I'm meditating, or I'll do that just I have a mat, and I also have the Juve little mini here that I can use, and I feel pretty recharged when I use that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've got a full spectrum infrared sauna.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'll sit in there daily, and I do my meditation in there. So try and stack a couple things. And that's
neat. Yeah.
Not that meditation is a biohack or anything like that. That's just ancient. But so you discussed a couple supplements there, and you talk about supplementation in the book as well. So what does your supplementation regime look like? And I'll just preface this for anyone watching. This is not Dr. Vuu's recommendation for what you should take. This is what he takes, and talk to your own professionals. So.
Yeah. So I'll go and I'll give sort of like, if somebody were to ask me if they weren't taking anything, number one, do they need to supplement or not? I do believe that we do need to supplement these days because, back in the day where we were, living outside, getting adequate sunlight, getting adequate sleep, we weren't stressed and we weren't in a toxin-filled environment, and our soil actually had nutrients in there. Sure, you don't need to supplement. Unfortunately, if you're living in the US, that's not the case, and our body needs supplementation. I test micronutrients all the time. I know people are low in vitamin D a lot, magnesium a lot. But so if somebody were to say, should I supplement? Where should I start? I would probably say, for a general population, if we didn't have medical history, take a multivitamin, do omega-3 fish oil, something for mitochondrial support, such as CoQ10, ALA, lipoic acid. Vitamin D is something on top of a multivitamin is usually helpful. Usually most multivitamins, your vitamin D range will be like 2,000 IU. I typically like to go, 5,000, 10,000 IUs because I find that people are really deficient in that. What else? So that would probably be the basics of what I recommend. And what do I take in addition? Well, because I had a history of diabetes, there are some supplements that I take to help lower my blood sugars, which is green tea extract, berberine, and chromium. I also take, high blood pressure is something that I have gone through as well. So I also take beetroot extract, citrulline, and things like that for my blood pressure, and to help with nitric oxide production. And then I'll basically, I also take a liposomal vitamin C from Live On Labs. That's a brand I actually, work with as well. So full disclosure there, but I take that, and I also take NMN.
Maybe we'll talk after we start recording on your sourcing for that. But so this is a good segue. So I saw that you have a Thrive State immunity supplement.
Yeah.
So I took a look at it. I haven't taken. I just kind of came across it in doing some research. But I really like what you have in there. Again, I take more than that again from a longevity and anti-aging point of view. But I really like the doses that you have in there. So what any other products coming down the pipeline under the brand?
Yeah, so the supplement that I take Actually, I also have the Thrive State Limitless supplement, but I only give those to my private clients because they're, it's a couple $100, and I don't want to, freak anybody out that's out there. But people who work with me will take the Limitless supplement. So, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to put that out there to the general public. Maybe I should just put it out there, and anyone who can afford it can take it. But that's something that I put together personally because I know that many people just like me right now, particularly as they're reaching the ages of 40 or so, they come with very similar complaints. It's energy, and then they might be pre-diabetic or diabetic, and they also, their blood pressure is a little bit on the higher side. So, I put that all together in a pretty comprehensive blend there. But those are the two that I currently have. Will we extend to sleep and maybe some stress? Possibly, but we don't have plans of that right now.
Okay, we'll talk about that at Limitless offline.
Sure,
I'm curious on that one. So, here's a question, a little bit of a different one. So, in the last maybe 2 to 5 years, what is one thing that you've completely changed your mind about when it comes to like the medical field or medicine?
Yeah, one of the things that I found to be that I changed my mind about is just that diseases are definitely preventable and reversible. Back during training, we knew that somebody getting insulin resistant was sure to get diabetes at some point, and anyone who had diabetes, there's no way of reversing it. Same when you've got some pretty bad autoimmune diseases and things like that. And it's just remarkable that once you start living a lifestyle that is in alignment of what your cells really truly need as the right signals to grow and to thrive and to flourish, all those things kind of slip away. It's when your cells are in constantly that stress state, which I talk about in my book, that's what leads to inflammation, that lowers immunity, and that energy basically sets up your whole entire system to eventually develop chronic disease. So one of the things that I started to see is just our remarkable ability to prevent ourselves from getting chronic disease and potentially even reverse some diseases.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, same question, but let's narrow it down to the last 14 months. We all know what's been going on for the last 14 months. So anything health or otherwise, medicine or otherwise, that you've changed your mind about?
The last 14 months. Well, I would probably say it's a very similar type of answer, but the answer really is how we are truly our best medicine. When we looked at America and we looked at our death rates, compared to the rest of the world dealing with COVID, we did a lot worse. And it's not because, and this was like really, really early on when we started to get the early data before the variants came out. And now it's skewed things up a little bit. But back then it wasn't because we had a different strain of the virus. It was the same virus, but why are people just doing worse? Well, it was because, we as Americans have the American lifestyle, which leads to a lot of people getting chronic disease. And that chronic disease, like I said, when we've got chronic disease, it means that we're giving ourselves the instructions to get disease. And when you're in that state, it puts you at a very, poor position to handle an additional stress such as COVID-19. And, what I've learned is basically, during this time that we are truly, truly responsible for setting basically the energetic signals for ourselves in terms of, directing ourselves how to behave. Are they going to behave in the thrive state where there's longevity, peak performance, and optimal health? Or do your cells think that you're constantly stressed running from a saber-toothed tiger, in which case you get prone to getting chronic disease? And the other thing I would probably say in the last 14 months is just how much our mental health affects our physical health, right? An inflammatory thought, a thought that puts you in a state of fear, of resentment, of anger, all those things are the same type of physiological responses that raises inflammatory markers, that lowers your immunity, as if you were running away from a saber-toothed tiger. And I really think the blessing is understanding that that's the case, because that can bring mental and physical disease into our body. But here's the blessing, is understanding that we now have control. And if we start to understand that our thoughts can lead to our feelings, if we could start to be more aware of those inflammatory thoughts and not give in and not focus in on them and say, oh my God, that's a terrible thought. Okay, I'm aware of that thought. Can I use Byron Katie's quote? How is this happening for me? Or I want to choose to show up with joy, with love, with connection right now. I can choose to do that no matter what's happening outside the world. Again, we put ourselves back in the driver's seat of our own health. So that's the other thing I would probably say that that the last 14 months have shown me.
Yeah, what you just said there remind me of I'm always behind on my listening to my podcast. I always get like 2-3 months behind on the ones I listen to regularly. But I was just listening to one probably from January of this year for Mark Sisson, who we mentioned earlier, and he said, when it comes to coronavirus, he basically said, I've been training for this for the last like 15 years to handle it. So I think just goes to what you said, like if we're, not only physically healthy, but spiritually and mentally as well, we can handle these type of situations.
Yeah.
So let's take a little bit of a bent here, and maybe this might be a bit of a fun one if you're game for it. But obviously, doing some research, you've worked with or met some very interesting people in the health field, celebrities, even if you will, icons in the world. Any funny stories or that you're able to share?
I wouldn't be able to share any ones that I'm personally working with as a
no
doctor.
Fair enough.
But let's see, any funny stories, any funny stories. I would probably say that everybody that I've met thus far that you've seen me in pictures with are really genuinely really great people. I'm just trying to think of a funny story to share. No, I was doing a podcast with this guy, AJ Buckley, who is a star on SEAL Team right now, CBS SEAL Team. And wasn't really a funny story, but we had basically two grown men that were going so deep into our history that we were just bawling our eyes out in the middle of the interview. So I'm going to plug my podcast, Thrive Day Podcast, and you check out that interview, episode 8 with AJ Buckley. That was amazing. But we were basically cracking up about two grown men crying. You'll see the very same thing with the Kyle Cease interview too, episode 12.
Awesome, and I'll put those in the show notes. Yeah. For sure. So you mentioned a little bit earlier, and we talked a little bit before we got on as well. But yeah, you have two little girls, a newborn. How's fatherhood changed you?
Well, firstly, I thought there was going to be some huge thing that hits me, and sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but then it does feel like that. But I'll give you a few examples of some pretty miraculous moments. Well, when my daughter was born, we my partner is a little bit on the older side, and we were told that if left in the womb too long, you could suffer some possible pregnancy complications. And so we decided if we weren't haven't delivered yet by 30 weeks, we would induce. And so we were at the hospital and we started the induction process, and we had wanted to have a vaginal birth. We wanted mom to, we wanted baby to go through the vaginal canal and to get mom's microbiome inoculated. And once they started the medications, she started to her contractions, and they couldn't find the baby's heartbeat, and we weren't sure if it was like a rookie nurse. But then she came in several times. Then the head nurse came in, and pretty much the whole floor of the staff came in, and we were thinking, oh my God, what's going on? And they said, we need to take your baby out now because she's not doing very well. And we weren't prepared for that, and so we had to have an emergency C-section. And we did, and the baby came out. She came out pretty blue, and turns out her cord was wrapped around her neck and her foot. And it was probably the scariest thing that has happened to me. And here I was like already starting to worry, like what happened if she didn't get enough oxygen? Like would she had have some kind of brain damage or lose some kind of health function or something like that? And I remember just holding her for the very first time. She had a tube down her nose, a tube down her mouth. She got an IV, tied to her arm, and her foot, had all these bloody marks because they were pricking her foot all the time. And I just looked at her, and I was thinking, you know what? If there was any type of deficit, whatnot, that's not going to change how much I love her. She would be still perfect to me no matter what the situation, and I love her so much, and she's worthy of love. And that was a very healing experience because that allowed me to just look back into my own life and say, well, how did I even have these thoughts of not being good enough, not being worthy, and whatnot? Because the fact of the matter is, and I allude to this a little bit in my book, is the fact that we made it here does mean that we're worthy. The chances of being alive right now is actually pretty remarkable. And everybody that's alive, that's breathing right now, is worthy, does have a gift to share with the world. And just seeing her in that moment, even so vulnerable, I was going into thinking, oh, okay, what if she had this deficit or that? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how she had turned out. She is still perfect. And that was just a lot of healing for myself because of, the conversations and thoughts I was having with myself, before I'm not feeling like enough. So, that has been a beautiful experience. And so I think there's a lot of healing, just seeing something so pure grow up. You just start to become a little bit more aware of losing yourself as an ego and as an identity, and learning to just give and love some more. So that's been a marvelous and a beautiful experience. And yeah, and then there's just the automatic, like, joy that you feel just from watching them giggle all the time. So it's an amazing adventure. So they are definitely medicine. So I definitely recommend anybody who's watching, have one of your own. Actually, you don't need to necessarily have one of your own. That's great. I think if you could tap into just love, if you could just love your neighbor like you would your own child, you would have the same benefits.
That's awesome, and I appreciate being so vulnerable and talking about that situation. Would you be open to me sharing a funny story? Because
Yeah, please.
somewhat related, yeah. So a little bit different. So our first daughter, she would not cooperate on any of the ultrasounds. She would always have her bum facing. We had no idea. When it got to the point where it was just comical. After like 3-4 ultrasounds, we're like, you know what? We weren't meant to know. No, it's just meant to be a surprise. So then my wife was late. So eventually they said, okay, we're just gonna, come on in. We'll induce. So they're getting the drip going, and nothing's happening. It's taking a long time. Then they kind of like turned it up a notch, and it went a little bit too fast then, and which kind of led to some issues afterwards. But anyway, the baby came so fast that the doctor, and it was busy. It was like a baby boom in our hospital in our town at that time. So our hospital was full. Ironically enough, we knew 4 other ladies that my wife that worked with at the same company. She works at a large company. 4 other ladies from the same company were all in the same day. It was
wow.
crazy. But anyway, so the doctor couldn't make it. So the nurse had to deliver our first daughter. And again, we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or girl when she came out. So she comes out, and I'm standing there, and she's got her hand underneath, and her and she's obviously got the gloves on, and all the fluid and blood and all that. So she's got her finger in between her in between her legs, and she's like, congratulations, you have a girl. And I like see this bloody little pinky finger or whatever of the nurse. I'm like, I think you're wrong. I thought it was a little penis, and then until I realized, like, oh, that's your finger. I'm like, oh my gosh, like. So that's just a funny story that's kind of gone along in our folklore in our family that we didn't know. But just moving on from that. So you alluded to just a minute ago about the new podcast that I just noticed that, yeah, you just started just recently, kind of in February, I believe. Mm-hmm. So what made you decide to jump into podcasting, and what's been the biggest surprise, if you will, thus far?
When you've got a message that you want to share, you want to just kind of be able to to actually go out and to share it. And it's one of these things that, you were thinking, I was certainly thinking, you know what, who could use another podcast? I mean, there's probably enough podcasts that are out there. So that's kind of stopped me for a really, really long time. But I just found that to be a great avenue to be able to meet people that you wouldn't normally meet, and to connect with people that you wouldn't normally connect with, and talk about things that really light you up. And so, so that's, that's what started the podcast. I'm really happy I get to do it. And I, again, meet and I talk with people that I wouldn't normally get to talk to. So I'm really hoping of trying out some different things. Right now I'm doing, I'm almost kind of starting off the show game show style for the last couple ones that I've done, asking people some rapid fire questions. So I think the medium is great, and it allows me to experiment and to tap into, some of that entertainer that's in me. So we'll see how that goes, but it's a really good time.
Awesome. So I just got a couple more questions before we wrap up here. So I see that you have this How to Thrive to 105. So is that a book or a program? I was a little
so How to Thrive to 105 is an ebook that that you can pick up. You can go to thrive to105.com, or just go to my website. It's a very basic beginner primer on epigenetics. And really, epigenetics is really the dominant science that basically tells us that how we live our life, our thoughts, our movements, our actions, our emotions, everything I talk about in Thrive State, really begins with that concept of these energetic forces outside actually interact with our DNA, not our DNA dictating our health. So really, if you want to learn what epigenetics is, to learn that basic science, to empower yourself, to really kind of take over your life, your performance, start there, particularly, for those people who have not heard about epigenetics before.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that. So what's your accelerator program? What does that entail?
Yeah, the accelerator has decelled in its launch date. We expect it to go out. I don't know when this podcast is going to go out, but certainly we can give your people and listeners a special discount for it. But basically, it's a companion to the book where we do a lot more exercises in depth to create your own blueprint to Thrive State. So a lot of it is working with some exercises that involve neuro-linguistic programming. There's a health tracker that's in there, and you're in there with other like-minded people in a Facebook group, cheering each other on to get you to Thrive State faster. So it's super fun. I'm super excited about it. It's, my team is a little late to launch it. Again, it'll probably go out in a week or two, and happy if some of your listeners joined in.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I wasn't sure what it was. It was a little unclear. So is it COVID related that why it's a bit delayed, or just life, I guess?
Oh, no, it's just life and team.
Okay. Fair enough. So as we wrap up here, is there any last nugget of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share with the audience, or a special ask of the audience?
No, just, I would probably, I close this on things that I say a lot. And, my biggest thing for people to understand is you are your best medicine. How you think, how you show up in the world day to day, that actually determines your health. That determines, the performance that you take with yourself, to your family, to your work, and all those places. And all that rests in you, your thoughts, your choices, and your everyday actions. So I want you to, however you might be feeling right now, know that if you can have that awareness and you unlock that, you will have, such a powerful and amazing life, and tap into the healing powers that are within your body. So again, you are your best medicine.
That's beautiful. I love that. So where can people find more about you? Where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I've got a website, where the podcast is on, where you can find the accelerator when it's going to open, at kienvuu.com. That's KIENVUU.com. I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn at Kien Vuu MD. So it's just my name with the words MD at the end. And you could find me also. The Thrive State podcast is on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are heard.
Awesome. And I'll put all those in the show notes as well for everyone to find out. So, I'd just like to say to the audience, if you'd like to see, I did a review on Thrive State. So if you'd like to see my book review on Thrive State, you can check it out at personalbluezones.com or Deepak Saini Health. And Kien, I really appreciate our conversation today. For you taking the time, it was a blast. If we both had more time, we could probably go for another couple hours. And just our similarities that we have with each other are very striking. But again, I really appreciate your time today.
You got it, brother. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, everyone, take care and see you soon.